It's 9 o'clock in the morning. And thanks for joining us. I will continue to accept people coming in. But let us begin. This is Bobby Batungbacal, of the Philippine Manufacturing Team. And today's meeting is about navigating a new era of reciprocal tariffs, um, strategic implications for the Philippines and selected ASEAN economies. Mula nang nag-retire si Fita, humahaba yung title, no? So I'm really excited about this. And Fita is our guest speaker, guest presenter, and we will be joined by Richard Abendan, Dr. Richard Abendan. He will be moderating the panel, no? And then our panelists will be coming from the different selected sectors that are affected positively or negatively by the reciprocal tariffs. So this our panelists will be Dr. Dan Lachica of SEIPI, Maritess Jocson of Agoncillo of Conwep, that's garments, Marco Reyes of UCAP, that's a coconut. Ajun Valenzuela, so the shout out to Aljun kasi he's actually in the airport, just came from New York, kaya he's about to join in a minute. And then Bob Herrera-Lim is the managing director of Teneo. Teneo is a global CEO advisory. So with that, let me sandali, ha? Keep on. Okay. I am showing you the agenda. Um, Hold on, let me admit all. Admit all. So we'll have a quick opening remarks, introduction of the speakers. Then we're gonna jump right to the presentation of Dr. Aldaba. We will then transition to the panel discussion. We will have an open forum at about 10:30 a.m. And then we'll synthesize, and then we'll finish at 11. We always finish on time, finish or not finish. Okay? So a few more coming in. Let admit them in. All right. Okay. A Philippine Manufacturing Team, I just wanted to share what has transpired the past few months in case, for the benefit of those who have not been with us in every event. The Philippine Manufacturing Team has been meeting every secretary of the DTI, siguro in the last 10, 15 years. The latest one is when we held a reception for Secretary Aldeguer in 2024. And then early this year, Valentine's, in fact, we had our first meeting for the year. That's for Trump tariffs. We had a roundtable of the prominent speaker and expert on the topic. Dr. Fita was there, DG Panga, Dr. Ronald, and Ferdy Rafael Santos of the parts makers. No? And then the following month, we held a face-to-face with Create More, called Create More Manufacturing in the Philippines. So the Create More law was just implemented. IRR was out, and Secretary Go agreed to address us face-to-face. And we had a lot of, this was sponsored, hosted by SGV. Secretary Roque was there again, the SGV folks, and our panelists. No? So, which brings us today. So with okay. Let's talk about just to kick off. Since our meeting ng February 14, where we talked about the implications of Tariff 2.0, we knew a little. We knew we didn't know a lot. And boy, 2 months later, ibang-iba. Ang daming nangyari, no? So, between that time, Dr. Fita was busy researching, analyzing, and she published a paper in the PIDS. And she said that, Bob, I'd be happy to share it in one condition, that you do it right away. Kasi baka pagkatapos nito, after a couple of weeks, conditions have changed, no? And so we're so honored, Fita, and I know you're gonna do a series of presentation, and I'm glad you chose us to be, one of the groups to be presented to, kasi the group, kasi you're addressing directly the manufacturers, no? So, uh, ano pa? So let me do a quick let me talk about Fita for a while, no? I met her 2011. She was in PIDS, senior fellow, vice president of PIDS. And I told her, Fita, FPI is putting up our first manufacturing summit. And then she was very helpful. We didn't know how to do that at that time. No, she was very helpful, and actually from 2011 to 2024, FITA held manufacturing summits every year, including the 2020 and 2021 COVID periods. Unbelievable. And a lot of the people here has been part of the annual manufacturing summit. So Vita recently retired, and it's not stopping her. I think we're probably gonna, ang kagandahan nito, as she moves out of government, we're gonna see more research material from her. So, sorry, I'm trying to bring in people as they come in. And with that, I would like to turn the floor over to Sec Fita. Sec Fita, Citizen Fita. Fita, put up your screen to give me time to open your presentation. Pwede.
Yes.
Okay. And you can address the group if you want.
Yeah, maybe I can provide some introduction as well.
Yes.
While Bobby is pulling up the presentation. So a very good morning, everyone. Today is such a beautiful day as we wake up to the announcement of the new Pope of the Catholic Church, Pope Leo XIV, which for me personally, it's a breath of fresh air in this troubled world. And we are grateful to you, Bobby, for organizing this online event. And thank you also to our colleagues for joining today's forum on a topic of growing urgency, the U.S. reciprocal tariffs. Okay. So the slides aren't there yet, but yeah, we are entering a new era in global trade, what many describe as a fragmenting world. And unlike the past decades of globalization, where rules-based trade and open markets were the norm, today we are facing increasing fragmentation driven by geopolitical rivalries, national security concerns, and economic nationalism. At the forefront of this shift is the age of tariffs. The latest example is the U.S. reciprocal tariff regime announced in 2025, which departs sharply from the multilateral principles of the WTO and introduces steep country-specific tariffs. These measures are reshaping trade flows and prompting companies to rethink supply chains, moving production out of high-tariff, high-risk countries. This has led to a significant reconfiguration of global value chains, or GVCs. Multinational firms are no longer optimizing purely for cost. They are now prioritizing resilience, diversification, and geopolitical alignment in their sourcing and investment decisions. And so for the Philippines, this presents both a challenge and a moment of opportunity. While our export base is relatively modest, we have a low tariff burden, a young and skilled labor force, and a growing digital backbone. If we act quickly and decisively, we can attract production shifts, upgrade our participation in global value chains, and diversify away from a narrow band of export products. So in this presentation, we want to explore how we can design an integrated industrial strategy that responds to this new global environment, repositioning the Philippines not just as a passive participant, but as a proactive, resilient, and trusted player in the evolving global trade system. There are four key areas that I would like to discuss in this presentation. First, we'll assess the vulnerability and strategic positioning not only of the Philippines, but as well as Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, and Vietnam. And second, we'll be measuring the impact using the tariff exposure composite index. And then we'll identify export risks and the opportunities and propose the strategic policy responses. Okay. Bobby, we don't see the slides yet.
Do you see it
But
now?
not yet. Are the slides on?
We don't see it also, Bobby. Let me see if I can try sharing. Maybe there's something on your side.
Sorry, I thought I was. Sharing.
Okay, so I think even with the okay, they're
Can you
yeah,
see
it's
it?
up now. Yeah.
Right.
Can we move on to the
Is this
next
right?
one?
Okay,
Next.
just prompt me a sec. I'll just move
Yeah.
aside.
Next slide,
Next picture.
because we've already covered that one. And next. Okay, let me start with this one. So, for us to be able to understand where we need to go, it's important to revisit how far we've come and what lessons we've learned along the way. So, the industrial policy journey of the Philippines reflects the major paradigms that shaped global economic thinking in each era, as you can see on the slide. So in the post-war decades, like many developing countries, the Philippines adopted an import substitution strategy. And the goal was to develop domestic industry by protecting local firms from foreign competition. While this nurtured some infant industries, it also created inefficiencies, entrenched monopolies, and limited innovation due to a lack of global competition. And by the late 1980s and early 1990s, the country dramatically shifted course, embracing unilateral trade liberalization under structural adjustment programs, foremost of which is the World Bank SAL. And tariffs were slashed across the board, often without corresponding industrial support or safeguards. While this opened up the economy, it also prematurely exposed underprepared industries, leading to deindustrialization and job losses. So the 2000s marked a renewed focus on export-led growth, riding the wave of globalization. Participation in electronics, global value chains expanded, and services exports, especially BPOs, surged. But unlike our peers, Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand, we lacked a coherent industrial upgrading strategy to move up the value chain. And the result has been low domestic value added, limited backward linkages, and shallow diversification. And so today we stand at a new crossroad. With global value chains fragmenting and geopolitical tensions rising, there is growing recognition that industrial policy is back on the agenda. But this time, not protectionist or subsidy-driven, but strategic, targeted, and aligned with global competitiveness. And strategies and initiatives like the Comprehensive National Industrial Strategy, Inclusive Innovation Strategy, the SCI-driven industrial policy, and the Tatak Pinoy Act reflect this shift. What we need now is to build on these efforts and integrate them with trade and digital strategies, because in this new and global environment, industrial resilience, trade positioning, and technology adoption can no longer be addressed in isolation. Next slide, please.
Guys, can you confirm? Can you confirm right, if you can see it? You can see the slide, Fita?
Yes.
Yeah, it's moving. All right.
Yeah. So moving on, the next slide discusses the U.S. reciprocal tariff regime, which was legislated through Executive Order 14257. For me, this represents the new trade regime of the U.S. and its industrial policy. Reciprocal tariffs are used to promote national security and industrial competitiveness, and at the same time reduce the dependence of the U.S. on foreign supply chains, hence the focus on critical products consisting of defense, semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, and agriculture. There is a 10% baseline tariff applied on all imports and higher tariffs for specific countries. Next slide, please. So in here, we present the list of tariff exemptions, which are intended to mitigate potential negative impacts on industries that are deemed critical to U.S. economic and national security interests. And the exempted products consisted largely of, as you can see, organic chemicals, wood, copper, electrical machinery and equipment, and semiconductor, covering those products that are listed on the slide. You can see various codes there. They are shown as they appeared in the memorandum order that was issued by President Bush. So it includes computers and semiconductor equipment, telecommunications and networking devices, storage, media and display panels, semiconductor devices and components, and integrated circuits. So you can see in here the importance of semiconductor to the US, and hence these are exempted from tariffs, from the reciprocal tariffs. So in the next slide, reciprocal tariffs are likely to trigger significant exposure risks depending on a country's export composition, dependence on the US market, and capacity to adjust trade and production structures. So the Tariff Exposure Composition Index, or TESI, is a tool that I used in assessing the exposure across 5 policy dimensions: tariff rate severity, tariff burden, exemption coverage, strategic exposure, and U.S. export dependence. So I'm going to explain this 5 policy dimensions in the next slide. Okay, so the tariff rate severity, this is just the reciprocal tariff under EO 14257. And the tariff burden, this refers to the share of a country's U.S. exports that are not exempted and will incur new duties. So this quantifies the actual financial impact of the tariff regime. And then for the exemption coverage, this is a metric that measures the proportion of a country's UX exports that are exempted from tariffs. And then I have here a qualitative indicator, which I call strategic exposure. This is a qualitative judgment on the strategic importance of affected goods to a country's industrial structure. So let's say a score of 1 would indicate that the exports are non-strategic, they are low-tech, low-dependence products, while 4, which is the highest, reflects highly strategic, concentrated in critical industries like semiconductors, electronics, automotive, ICT, pharmaceutical, where disruption could impair national competitiveness. And then the last one, you have U.S. export dependence. This is a metric measuring the degree to which a country relies on the U.S. market, and this is measured by the share of its exports to the U.S. So each of the 5 indicators is assigned a risk score from 1 to 4, where 1 indicates low vulnerability and 4 represents very high vulnerability. Except for exemption coverage, the scoring is inverted. Higher exemption shares, of course, will reduce your exposure. So next slide. So in here, I'm showing you the relative exposure of the ASEAN 5 economies to the U.S. market. And Vietnam emerges as the largest exporter, accounting for nearly half of total ASEAN 5's total exports to the U.S. And 35% of its exports, they go to the U.S. Thailand follows, and it contributes around 22% of ASEAN 5 total U.S. exports, while its U.S.-oriented exports represent around 22%. Malaysia ranks 3rd, and it accounts for around 18% of ASEAN 5 U.S. exports and 16% of its total global exports. Indonesia's exports to the U.S. Represents around 10% of the ASEAN 5 exports. Its U.S.-bound exports accounts for only 11%. As you can see, the Philippines records the smallest export footprint among the ASEAN 5 countries, with its exports making up just 5% of ASEAN 5's total, although the U.S. represents a significant proportion of our total exports. It's 20% in 2024. So the slide also provides the major exports of the 5 countries to the U.S. And for Vietnam, these are led by electronics like data processing machines and communication apparatus. But at the same time, it also exports furniture and footwear to the U.S. Thailand's exports are dominated by auto parts, electronics, and transmission equipment. Again, this is a reflection of the country's advanced manufacturing base, as well as its close ties to global supply chains. Malaysia's top exports to the U.S. consist of high-value, high-tech electronic components like integrated circuits, semiconductor, media, ICT accessories, again, reflecting its strategic role in the global electronics supply chain. For the Philippines, we have electronics, semiconductor, media, storage devices, ICT parts, but at the same time, we also have coconut oil among the top 10, including printing machines. As you can see, our exports indicates limited product diversification and small volume. Now for Indonesia, these are primary and agro-based products like palm oil, rubber, frozen seafood, and footwear. So in the next slide, so these are the exempted products which indicates sectors that are more resilient and likely to be shielded from immediate disruption. And there are strong similarities among Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, and Thailand in the manufacturing and export of electronics and ICT products. The four countries share a common core of electronics, semiconductors, ICT equipment, and machinery parts. And the above indicates that the four countries are deeply integrated into the global electronics supply chains. For Indonesia, the exempted products are heavily skewed towards primary products and low-tech goods, natural rubber, wood products, tin, plywood, and crude petroleum, and only limited presence in electronics. Okay. So the next slide, we look at the non-exempted items, and these items would signal where each country faces potential cost pressures, competitive disadvantage, or trade reallocation risks in the U.S. market. And for the Philippines, these are electrical components like conductors and static converters, coconut oil printing machines, and rubber tires. For Vietnam, this consists of furniture, footwear, photovoltaic panels or solar panels, and consumer electronics. Thailand, also solar panels, TV cameras, car and bus tires, rice, and consumer electronics. For Malaysia, we have solar panels, rubber gloves, printing equipment, miscellaneous medical devices, and low-end electronics. For Indonesia, these are concentrated in palm oil, rubber tires, footwear, crustaceans, and apparel, which implies that its export structure is heavily reliant on primary goods and labor-intensive industries, most of which are unprotected. In the next slide, okay, so we now present the tariff exposure levels of the ASEAN 5 countries, which is being measured by the Tariff Exposure Composite Index. As you can see, Vietnam registers the highest tariff exposure risk. And this is followed by Thailand, which is also categorized as high risk, but it's below Vietnam. Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines are classified as moderate risk, though with varying degrees of vulnerability and resilience. Vietnam and Thailand are most at risk under the U.S. reciprocal tariff regime due to their export concentration, high U.S. dependence, and moderate exemption buffers. Meanwhile, Malaysia and the Philippines, we are benefiting from higher exemption levels and more strategic insulation in electronics, while Indonesia's low U.S. dependence reduces its systemic risk. So next slide, please. So in here, we plotted tariff rates and exemption coverage. And then I divided the area into 4 quadrants. Q1 is the most ideal zone with low tariff and high exemption. And then quadrant 2, low tariff plus low exemption. Quadrant 3, that's high tariff and moderate exemption. And then we have Q4, which is high tariff and low exemption. And as you can see, Malaysia and the Philippines are in the most favorable quadrant, low tariff and high exemption. Vietnam and Thailand are in quadrant 3, higher risk of trade and production disruption. That's the implication of being or of falling in quadrant 3. And Indonesia is in quadrant 4, meaning it's relatively the most exposed among the 4 countries. Next slide, please. So let's now talk about China's exports to the U.S. China faces a very steep tariff of 125% because of all the retaliation that happened. And over 91% of its exports to the US are not exempted from tariffs. And the financial burden is profound. Its exports are concentrated in high-tech, high-value, and strategic sectors like electronics, machinery, photovoltaic cells, and ICT components, which expose it to potential systemic vulnerability and long-term disruption. And let me also note that while Malaysia, Vietnam, and the Philippines have existing electronic sectors, they may not be immediate substitutes for such highly capital and scale-intensive exports. However, for back-end operations, component supply, or peripheral device production like memory cases or chargers, we could be viable relocation points. And then for its non-exempted exports, China actually is showing a very different picture. While its exempted goods are really on the more high-tech, more high-value side, for the non-exempted products, these are mostly light manufacturers, consumer electronics, household goods and toys, textiles, footwear, kitchenware, furniture, auto parts, electrothermic appliances, and cooling devices. So these are, as you can see, mostly mass-produced, commoditized, and price-sensitive products. And these are ideal, actually, for relocation to lower-cost ASEAN economies or for redirection toward emerging consumer markets like Indonesia, Vietnam, or the Philippines. So as the trade conflict intensifies, China will likely redirect these exports toward alternative destinations. Chief among them would be ASEAN. Proximity, integration through the RCEP are some of the reasons why. And let me note that while this can bring benefits in the form of cheaper inputs and cheaper consumer products, wider variety, wider of availability of various goods, although they are already here, right? But it also raises concerns of market saturation, suppressed local pricing, and crowding out of our domestic industries within ASEAN. At the same time, the US tariffs of 125% on Chinese goods create strong incentives for multinationals to relocate production to lower-end or lower-risk jurisdictions. And this opens a critical window of opportunity for the ASEAN 5 countries, particularly those with low tariff exposure to the US. And we know that the Philippines has the lowest among the 5. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. So we see that there are opportunities for the relocation of production from China, and ASEAN 5 is ready to absorb diverted investments. Actually, both Philippines and Malaysia are best positioned in electronics. For Malaysia, it could be lithium battery pack assembly, while for the Philippines, we could absorb investments in light electric devices, including those in appliances, footwear, garments, accessories, and toy manufacturing. Vietnam could attract more furniture, garments, footwear, and plasticware that are being relocated from China. And for Thailand, vehicle parts, household appliances, kitchen tools, and furniture. And for Indonesia, perhaps footwear, tires, and consumer plastics. But bottom line is we need strong collaboration, and we need to position ASEAN as strategic beneficiaries amid this global trade restructuring. With strong collaboration, we can strengthen our regional bargaining power. We can better harmonize our rules of origin, along with how to address trade deflection and industrial crowding out. So the next slide. We are again at a strategic inflection point. We have the lowest U.S. Reciprocal tariff in the region, relatively high exemption coverage. We have a robust base in electronics and semiconductors. I've also listed down here particular or the more specific semiconductor products where we could attract and expand and scale up and move up the value chain. But then again, we need to ensure that we're able to comply with the strict U.S. rules of origin. Our infrastructure must be ready. Our labor force must also be aligned. And of course, we need to address our limited industrial depth, meaning we need to be able to expand our backward linkages and attract more investments, build our supply chain. Okay, so in the next slide, I actually, based on the analysis, I'm suggesting two major strategies in this fragmented world. Of course, we need to align trade and industry policies, but it's really important for us to pursue, number one, an industrial upgrading and resilience building program, and which would enable us to transition from assembly-centric to more upstream activities. I'd like to emphasize as well the need for us to align technical, vocational, and our higher education programs with the 21st century industrial needs like automation, electronics, AI. And second is the need for us to strengthen our trade defense and monitoring mechanisms. We need to be able to implement WTO consistent safeguards, anti-dumping, and countervailing duties. We need to build a more dynamic trade intelligence and early warning system, as well as maybe create a trade industrial transformation council that would be in charge of our integrated trade defense, industrial upgrading, and investment promotion. So for the last slide, I think we just want to conclude with these 4 points. We are in a moderately exposed position, and we need structural reforms to be able to attract the GVC reconfiguration that's currently taking place. Digital, skilled, and resilient economy will be key in order for us to be able to seize the window before competitors move ahead. So I'm going to stop there, Bobby. Thank you very much.
Tita, maraming salamat. What an excellent presentation. Excellent paper, no? You know what's amazing? Yeah, you did this in a month or a month and a half. And I can imagine while you're doing that, everything is siguro pagkasulat mo, oh, something happened na naman, something changed, like the 90 days reprieve na ginawa ni Donald Trump. So truly appreciate it. So, I think there's a couple of things that I want to mention here, before we go to the panel discussion. One is that it is an inflection point. It is an inflection point that is favorable sa atin if we take action and advantage, no? And I mean, we've been tracking manufacturing development of the different ASEAN countries. May kanya-kanyang inflection point yan eh. If you look back at COVID, no? the countries that continued producing versus those who went on severe lockdown, they dramatically jumped. We talk about Vietnam, no? So, at different times in our development, may kanya-kanyang inflection point because of an external event like COVID or this. Meron naman internal event. Take for example, those who are undergoing political crisis tend to be distracted, no, because of what's happening. I think we're in a good position. And I think we recognize. Kasi sometimes, inflection points, hindi natin napapag-usapan. And then, lumampas na pala yung iba. And then we say, oh, sayang. But now, ito is not sayang. We see it clearly. We're discussing. And I call on companies and industries to work with government, work with the DTI, work with the DFA, work with the DOF, and all of this matters. Last point na lang before I go to Richard. Now, when we organized this meeting, I was thinking, baka puro exporters lang makikinabang dito. But no, when you look at your strategy, there's an important part there, which is defense, no? And there is no doubt that if we don't act, a lot of domestic manufacturers are going to be affected. And that's why coordination with government on the defense and vigilance is going to be as important as our offensive strategies in getting more exports. No? So at that, I'd like to let me Fita, maraming salamat again. You'll be part of the panel so that in the Q&A, of course. I'd like to introduce Richard. For those who don't know Richard, Dr. Richard Abendan. Dr. Richard is an expert on innovation, education, and workforce development. He has been working in the Philippines for on different projects for 11 or maybe a dozen years with USAID, RTI, doing those projects related to workforce development and innovation. But did you know that Richard is a pharmaceutical scientist? He started his undergrad in chemistry in Ateneo and finished his PhD in chemistry in Georgetown University. So with that, I'd like to turn you over to Richard.
Thanks, Bobby, for the kind introductions. And good morning, everybody. I'm really happy to be hosting this, and thanks, Bobby, for inviting me to
You're welcome.
moderate this
See
session.
you tomorrow.
I think we have somebody off mute.
Pwede ba gumamit ng yellow pad ko?
Bobby can just control.
I will.
Lang. Wag lang mawawala yung ibig sabihin may file ka. Thank you.
Sana yun.
Okay. Anyways,
Got it.
and Dr. Fita for your presentation on your paper. We looked at the sort of impacts, the metrics, sort of the exposures, the export opportunities in your recommendations. And so maybe we'll do a deep dive now in our discussion now with our panelists. And I'll introduce our panelists later as we call on them, because I think Bobby introduced them early on already. So we'll try to see sort of their own perspectives about what you're seeing from your perspective to sort of the individual sector perspectives. But before we sort of talk to our panelists, I just want to ask Fita here, maybe sort of kick off our discussion, sort of frame the issue. I think you're seeing that you're describing a sort of a big shift in terms of the tariff regime, that we're going away from multilateralism. And is that really what we're seeing? And how does this reshape how we look at the global trade order from a Philippine perspective? You already alluded to that in terms of like aligning trade policies, the trade defense side. But I guess, is this a shift back to what you're saying is back to like bilateral agreements or not? You said you're on mute.
Yes, we're gradually seeing a shift from multilateralism towards bilateralism. And this, as an example, would be the U.S. reciprocal tariff regime. And this is going to disrupt established global value chains, incentivizing firms to relocate production away from high tariff jurisdictions like China to lower risk and tariff resilient countries like us, or the entire, I would say, ASEAN. And with rising tariffs, firms will reconfigure their supply chains to avoid high tariff jurisdictions. And this would encourage friendshoring or China plus one strategies, which would benefit some and exclude others. And for small countries like ours, this presents a strategic opportunity to attract investment and integrate deeper into the reconfigured supply chains, but only if the country reforms quickly to offer reliable infrastructure, skilled labor, and industry. Earlier initiatives that we've already put in place, perhaps on the implementation side, as well as in terms of, I'm thinking maybe we need to strengthen the Tatak Pinoy Council. The Tatak Pinoy Act institutionalizes our industrial policy, but I hope we could go be the council in terms of the work that it's currently doing. I hope it could go beyond coordination and really move towards strategic action, which, like what I've pointed out, based on the analysis, we really need to integrate our industrial policy with our trade and investment strategies.
Thanks, Dr. Fita. Maybe let's now hear from our panelists. And I think Dr. Fita talked about the Philippines being rated a moderate risk under the TECI framework. What does this really mean for our individual sectors represented here? So maybe I'll call on first Dr. Dan Lachica from the Semiconductors and Electronics Industries in the Philippines Foundation, representing this group. And maybe Dan, we've been in many panels together. And Dr. Fita talked about a robust base in electronics and semiconductors. What's your take in terms of the sector being somewhat largely exempted? Has that aspiration changed for the sector with what's going on now, or is still the same discussion about moving up the value chain?
Thanks, Richard. And beforehand, thank you, Bobby, for the invitation, and Citizen Peter for the comprehensive presentation. Well, people ask about the implication of the U.S. trade policy, and it's really a mixed bag. You're right in terms of the semiconductor space. We have something like $4.5 billion of IC chips that are, to date anyway, exempted. I have been talking to some of the CEOs of our SMS companies, Semiconductor Manufacturing Services, and it's good today. But again, with the volatility of the Trump administration, we don't know what's going to happen, right? But so far, so good for the semiconductor space. For the EMS space, and we were talking about assemblies and sub-assemblies, there's about $1.5 billion of exposure. And currently, the tariffs range from about 3 to 7%. So hopefully, that will not go up, and if anything else, hopefully we've had the successful results for the negotiating team led by Secretary Deck and Secretary Chris, who were in Washington to negotiate for lower tariffs. But it's interesting because, as you know, Malaysia is chairing the ASEAN community, and initially they kind of purported that, ASEAN, we're a big economy, we should negotiate for, common tariffs for the country, right? Use that leverage, but that's not going to happen. ASEAN, as you know, has commonalities, but then again, there are unique features of each country, whether it's trade or geopolitical security and what have you. And that's why what happened was several countries on their own went ahead and initiated the negotiations. And most of them, unlike China, which decided to retaliate, negotiated for lower tariffs, and which is the right thing to do, especially for the Philippines. By the way, most of our competitors, Peter was right, have higher tariffs. Singapore has lower, 10%. Well, before the moratorium, they had 10% versus our 17%. But the good news, if you will, is that Singapore doesn't really have a very big manufacturing base. And in electronics, they have semiconductors, which are, for the most part, exempted as well. So that's kind of the landscape for the semiconductor electronics industry. By the way, the other question that's often posed is, what does this tariffs effect? What's the effect on our forecast? Most of you know that we've contracted 2 straight years, 8% in 2023, 6% in 2024. We're still maintaining our forecast of flat growth because, like I said, there's still a lot of volatility in terms of this trade concerns. There's also talk about, and Tita mentioned that, the country of origin. And obviously, for the semiconductor space, I think the definition really is where the leads are connected for the assembled ICs. For the semiconductor process, the front end, as we call it, it's where the diffusion processes happen. So we're not quite there yet, although we have plans to propose for the government for a wafer lab, which would be a starting point for eventually inviting commercial wafer fabs. And by the way, that's the other thrust of our ASEAN neighbors. Everybody and their mothers pursuing wafer fabs to, as Pita put it earlier, to upstream in the value chain, diversifying our semiconductor products instead of just remaining in the so-called, in semiconductor terminology, the back-end assembly, test, and packaging. We want to move up. We're not quite ready to be in the commercial space, but hopefully this will be a first step towards that end. And you know, we're Vietnam, Malaysia, all our other countries, even Thailand already has a wafer fab, and so we're falling behind. So we got to take the first step now, albeit in modest steps. So I'll stop there for now. Thank you, Richard.
Thanks, Dan. And maybe we'll come back to some points that you brought up, particularly around maybe sort of what are the next steps? You already mentioned sort of like the first steps, like sort of what are the aspirations? But maybe let's shift to another sector that's sort of on the opposite side of the spectrum, where they're sort of more exposed to tariffs. So I'd like to call on Maritess Agoncillo, the Executive Director for Conwep, the Confederation of Wearables Exporters of the Philippines. Maritess, I believe you also have a slide that you wanted to share. But the same question, sort of what are you seeing from your sector? Also particularly because we believe that I think your sector has been very exposed to the tariffs. What are sort of the challenges and opportunities that you're looking at? Maritess, go ahead.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you for this opportunity, Bobby, and hello, USEC. I still call you USEC, Pita. I'm not yet used to that. Thank you for this opportunity. Yes, I would like to share a slide, if I can share. Hold a sec. How to navigate this? I can share, right?
I think we gave approval for everybody.
Okay.
Let me know if you have it.
Yes, multiple is enabled.
Multiple is enabled. Okay, so I'm sharing this now. I think, yeah. Oh, wait. Okay, anyway, share my desktop. Yes. Okay, I will, this is, I think, thank you very much. We are, unlike my BFF friend on the electronic sector, Dan, we are really, I think we are carved out. We are exposed to very high tariffs. The 17 is a plus to us. And when the DTI went for the May 2 initial negotiations, I think we're the only group that sent a position in a PowerPoint presentation, which is now being shared. Are you seeing this? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So our universe basically consists of 15 chapters. and we our vulnerability, which USEC-FITA has already explained, is we are still in the regime of the rules of origin, simply because our products, garments, shoes, and bags are basically coming from an animal skin, which is leather, basically. So it's a cow or a snake skin, and fiber, which is basically cotton, wool. So this industry is governed by the rules of origin. So just to show this, when we presented to the DTI, we are looking at 15 chapters, even if only 3 or 4 chapters, which is chapter 42, travel goods, chapter 61 and 62 and 63, actually 5, are the apparel chapters, and chapter 64 is the footwear chapters. Okay, even if we're only looking at 4 to 5 chapters, we are looking at 5,000. Our whole universe is about 15 chapters or 5,800 lines. Okay, each of this chapter ranges from an average for travel goods, for example. It's an average tariff of 8 to 20%. That's for the bags. For the apparel chapter 61 to 63, it's a minimum of average of 15% to 32% for apparel. Okay. And for footwear, it's an average of 8 to 37.5% tariff. Okay. So the inflection point, which is taking off from Yusek Vita's presentation, is actually ripe at this time. If we could negotiate, the country could negotiate. But I think for our industry, we have tried this in the past, way back in 2008 to 2012, when we tried for a sectoral negotiation. Since it's rooted in rules of origin, we do it line by line or chapter by chapter. And so we would like a sectoral, as you can see here, when we presented this, it's a tariff review position for apparel, textile, travel goods, footwear, and leather goods. No, so with these chapters, if we have 15 chapters, the other chapters, the 10 textile chapters, are the ones we still have to kasama to in the universe. We still have to negotiate this, because these are the determinant chapters where the rules of origin comes into play. Okay, so where you sourced your wool, where you sourced your fiber, where the fiber was woven, and basically this is currently controlled by China. So this would be our universe. It would be a little more difficult for us because we're already heavily laden with tariff. We're an average of, like what I said, 15 to 37% for all the travel goods, the shoes, and the apparel. Okay, so this is our biggest vulnerability, and what we could do now is, if the U.S. stands firm to give a higher tariff to our ASEAN counterparts, we still have that advantage. If we're going to go at 17, if it can be negotiated to 10, if it can be negotiated to 0. So what we requested the Philippine government is, I think we will be carved out. We might have a sectoral negotiation. In the end, we might be carved out separately because it's a bit too technical, and we might really go on a sectoral negotiation. And this would be advantageous to us. The other advantage would be our neighboring ASEAN countries within the region. Our number one competitor is Cambodia, Vietnam, and they share a border. Our geographic location can work for us because they share a border with China. And if the garments apparel sector would be negotiated by the United States on a sectoral basis, then we stand a chance to benefit from this because the United States will definitely impose additional non-tariff barriers on our ASEAN counterparts like Vietnam, Cambodia, Myanmar, because of the movement, the possible movement of materials within that region. So this is where we are. Uh, we have these are our priority sectors, our duty rates, our FOB value, and we hope that the government can I think it will go through a sectoral negotiation for apparel, shoes, and bags. Thank you. I'll
Thanks,
stop.
yes, thank you.
Thank you.
In terms of like, you already made clear about sort of how government can help in terms of that carve out, right? From an industry side, is there something else that has to be done in terms of like skills upgrading, incentives, infrastructure, logistics that sort of could help you in this sort of situation?
Well, one of our disadvantages is our infrastructure, our ports, our logistics. We don't have mother feeder. We have feeder ships. We don't have a. That's one of the requirements of the industry that I think is shared by the other sectors. Our ports, additional. I'm not sure if Bataan. I think there's a move to make Bataan, the port of Bataan, in the next few years. I think the Bataan local government is looking into that. That can really be a major of a port that does not need feeder vessels. It can go for the motherships. I hope that works. That infrastructure is one. Skills, as far as skills is concerned, um, we have 115 million people in the country. We can train these people in 4 to 6 weeks inside the factories. And so it's favorable. It's not a deterrent.
There's a
We have it. There's a pot. There's a pot. However, one of the deterrents is the how would I say this nicely? One of the deterrent is the in the last 3 years, the wage increase was very, very high. In the last 3 years, we did a study on this for 3 regions, region 3, 4, and 7, where it's it's the nucleus of the manufacturing sector. For region 4, there was a 50% increase in just the last 3 years. So this is one of those things that if we can it should go back really to the Regional Trial Wage Board, a review with the RTWB to really come up with a program that it is manageable based on the current formula, that it is based on inflation rate. So we need that. We need some stability on that. And I think that's about it. But however, if we really get favored, it's an inflection point. This is the growth, and we can do it. Thank you.
Okay, now let's move on to the coconut industry. And so maybe I'll pass the same question now to Marco Reyes, Chairman of UCAP, United Coconut Association of the Philippines. Marco, with sort of coconut oil sort of among the non-exempted exports facing tariffs, how's the industry adjusting or responding to this?
Thank you, Richard, and thank you, Dr. Fita, for a very nice presentation. So just to give a context on our coconut industry from the Philippines, the Philippines is the #1 exporter of coconut products in the world. And number 2, ang coconut po natin, this is 100% local content. So this is a massive contribution to our gross domestic product because there's no imported component. So what we are facing right now, Richard and Dr. Pita, is actually a good problem. We need more coconuts to export. And in fact, a few years ago, I was talking with a person from U.S. Department of Agriculture based in the Philippines, and he said, we need more coconuts. The U.S. needs more coconuts. And we were reviewing, in fact, the statistics of our exports of products from the Philippines. It has been really growing substantially from 2021 up to 2024. And from 2023 to 2024 alone, it jumped by 43%. Now it accounts for 700 million US dollars of export revenue in 2024. And it's still increasing. So even if now we are scrambling for the available coconuts, and coconut prices have really gone off the roof. So that's the main concern of our coconut industry in the Philippines. So, well, the reason is because number one, we have no competition in the US for coconuts. They have their own oils, soybean oil, corn oil, canola, but they are not substitutable to our coconut oil. Our coconut oil is for it has the highest what you call medium chain content of food, the chemicals or factants. And as soon as the USA colonized the Philippines in 1898, soon after we have Procter and Gamble putting up the soap plant here. We have Franklin Baker putting up the desiccated plant here. We have Peter Paul. So we have more than 100 years of American consumption of our coconut products. And but so we are not too concerned on these reciprocal tariffs because number one, our 17% is the lowest among all the other coconut competing countries. They range from 26 to 42%. What we are preparing now on the part of defense is DTI is negotiating with them to bring it back to 0% because the other coconut competing countries are also negotiating with the US to bring down the tariff. But
So I guess you're in a
yeah,
very enviable position where you're sort of the number one exporter, and in a way, you're saying that there's sort of that product dominance. Uh, so you're saying that actually short term, you're actually seeing sales stay the same. There's no dip with the tariffs, or at least, or maybe people are actually hoarding and buying more from the US before the tariffs hit. Are you seeing what? Or are you seeing the short term?
what we are seeing right now is really a constraint on supply. So now, because of the El Nino, like 21, 22, 22, and the coconut trees have really been stressed. So now the harvest has been much lower. Coconut trees in the Philippines are many of them are senile, and the yield now is much lower. So that's the main goal now for the Philippine coconut industry, which the Philippine Coconut Authority is aware of, is to really plant more coconut trees. So they have a lot of programs to. But now it's a supply issue. Europe also, our biggest exports goes to Europe, and by next year they will have a European Union deforestation regulations, which heavily favors our coconut. So we will have a lot of demand also coming from the EU. We have a lot of demand from the US. We need to plant more coconuts because otherwise Indonesia, Thailand, India, they are heavily planting coconuts there.
Okay, thanks, Marco. Let's move on to the furniture sector. We have Arjun Valenzuela joining us from the US, I believe. Arjun is the Director General for the Chamber of Furniture Industries of the Philippines. Arjun, what are your thoughts on sort of your sector? I believe like Vietnam is facing a lot more of the higher tariffs, which I think some of your main competitors. Is that something of an opportunity there?
Yeah, hi Richard. Yeah, first of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Fita for a very wonderful presentation and for the research. No? I understand 1 month lang yan nagawa yan. So thank you very much, Dr. Aldaba. So, well, I'll focus first on the opportunity. No? On the surface, we see a big opportunity because the 17% US tariff is a much lower barrier than Vietnam, which has 46%, and Thailand, 36%. This actually creates a window for Philippine furniture exporters to attract US buyers seeking alternative to Vietnamese suppliers. We can rely on our strength, no? The unique craftsmanship, the indigenous materials, and the reputation for quality to fill part of this gap, especially in niche and premium segments. However, there are a lot of challenges also. So one is the labor cost disadvantage that was mentioned also in the paper, in table 9 of the Dr. Aldaba's paper. Average monthly manufacturing wage is significantly higher than Vietnam. No? Philippines is 420 to 450 US dollar, while Vietnam only has 300 to 350. So the labor cost gap makes it difficult for Philippine producers to compete on price, especially for large-scale commoditized orders. So quickly lang, of course, production scale and supply chain, most SMEs limiting their ability to quickly scale up. It's hard to expand. Vietnam sector is more consolidated and deeply integrated in the global value chain. Electricity costs, it's a significant input for furniture, so masyadong mataas din. In Vietnam, industrial electricity rates average around 0.07 to 0.08 per kilowatt per hour. So in Philippines, it's very much high, 0.15 to 0.17. That was also mentioned in the paper. Okay. In terms of raw materials, Vietnam benefits from proximity to large plantations and easy access to imported timber through established supply chains. We rely on both local natural material products or materials and imported wood. So under the new US tariff regime, the wood and articles of wood are exempted, allowing Philippine manufacturers to import sustainable and certified solid wood from the US at very competitive rate. This is a strategic advantage for quality and compliance, especially for eco-conscious markets. In fact, we put that in our position paper addressed to the government last week. And then Philippine brands are less established in the US than Vietnamese, requiring sustained investment in marketing, compliance, and relationship building. But what we are worried here, Richard, is the risk of trade diversion. Singapore, with only a 10% US tariff, may act as a re-export hub for Vietnamese furniture. No? Kasi mas mababa Singapore. And we know for a fact that Singapore is not a manufacturing country in terms of furniture. So they sourced before in China and now they are sourcing from Vietnam. So it potentially dilutes the Philippines' competitive edge if rules of origin are not strictly enforced. Also mentioned by Dr. Fita. And then in terms of domestic market implication naman, medyo malaki rin ang impact sa amin. No? Very challenging kasi there's a risk that they will find new markets. No? Vietnamese and Chinese furniture now less competitive in US could be redirected to the Philippines. No? So this could lead to import flooding, increased competition, and putting downward pressure on prices in the local market. So the local manufacturers, especially the SMEs, will need to differentiate on quality, design, and sustainability to survive. So sa regional industry dynamics naman, turning into the broader regional context, Vietnam has emerged as a major furniture manufacturing hub with large-scale, cost-efficient production, strong integration into global value chain. And then so for Philippine furniture industry, actually this dynamic presents both risk and opportunities. Risk is that Vietnamese furniture exported to Singapore could undercut Philippine exports, especially since the Philippines faces a higher 17% tariff. And then opportunity, as mentioned earlier, emphasizing craftsmanship, sustainability, and authentic storytelling. Well, sabi mo in question mo kanina, if we can fill in the gap, yeah, the Philippines can fill in the gap by looking into the high quality offering. Well, I think that would be a primary market now for us.
Do you see the tariff difference between, say, the Philippines and the Vietnam significant enough that you can somehow overcome sort of the disadvantages that you're facing? You mentioned about sort of the minimal integration into the value chains, raw materials, the marketing side. But is it a game changer? In other words, a difference? And in a way, do you see already an uptick in terms of exports?
Well, Vietnam is exporting more than 10 billion in terms of furniture, and we are only exporting less than 500 million in terms of furniture. The price difference is around 40 to 50%. Um, when you compare it with Vietnam, so I guess the huge difference, no, so between 17 and 46 would not be significant, no? Because of course masyado ring mababa rin yung presyo ng Vietnam. So I guess and then we will be importing wood, so to comply with the sensitive markets, no, in terms of sustainability, mapapataas na naman yung presyo namin. So, I don't know if there's a significant Richard.
Okay, because it's interesting, right? Because there's this talk about the opportunity or the advantage, but maybe overall cost, you look back, it might sort of be diluted, right? That impact. Okay,
It
so
offsets that.
maybe for our other sectors. Thanks for that, Arjun. Maybe I want to sort of now ask Bob. Bob, coming from Teneo and managing director from Teneo, one of the leading management and CEO advising firms. Bob, I guess what are you seeing, like if you're now advising your clients, like how do you make the Philippines or some Philippine industry sort of become more attractive for sort of high value production, or to sort of position themselves in a more advantageous way, given sort of take advantage of what's going on now with the tariff discussions?
Yeah, thanks, Richard. Now, I think I have 3 or 4 points to make. The first is we are only in the midst of the tariff restructuring, right? Right now, it's at different rates. Do we end up closer to the 10% to 20% globally, or do we end up at some weird 50, 60%? We don't know. It will probably take the better part of this year for all these things to even get some sort of structure. That means investment decisions will be slow coming in for the foreseeable future. Because if you're a manufacturer, you don't know where you're going to put up your next factory if you're not sure what the tariff rates are. Tariffs are tax on consumers, but they actually are also a tax on investment. So that's the first thing. So the equilibrium that we need for the sort of predictability is not going to be there for the foreseeable future. That's the first thing that many of our manufacturers must be cognizant of. So
right? Yeah, I think Dan alluded to that also. That is sort of a wait and see.
Let's not be ambiguous. It is going to be the problem for the next 6 to 12 months. The second thing is the equilibrium that will emerge from this will determine how value chains reshape. So it's really difficult because it's not only the US, it will be China. What if China starts opening up its markets? What if the Europeans implement reforms that expand their demand for products? So mag-shift rin ulit ang supply chains based on this. So the global equilibrium for trade is going to take time to reshape. That is very important. The second thing is this. In listening to the conversations, like the wearables industry, one of the things I think we can agree on is that we have lagged. Let's not be ambiguous about it. We have lagged our ASEAN peers in attracting investment into FDI and manufacturing, not just across one administration, but multiple administrations for the better part of the last 30, 40 years, right? So you can't politicize it and lay it down on one presidency and say it's somebody's fault. So the question I'd like to pose to the group is, like, what decisions have not been made or done, and why have we not made those decisions? Right? We have the opportunity. We are all preaching to the choir that there is potential and we can take advantage of it. We are not answering the second part of the question, which is, what have we not done and why have we not done it? Like ports, there was a mention, we have an adequate port system, right? I think that was the message from the wearable sector. Why don't we have a port system? What is the cost of the investment? Why have we not built the port system? Who has not made the decision That's the question we have to ask, because we are voting in elections. And those are the difficult questions we must ask. Why are our leaders not making the decisions? I'm talking as a Filipino here, not as a Teneo guy. Okay. Why have we not made those decisions? If we are talking about energy infrastructure, okay, I know Popo Lutilla. He's a good friend. He's a great guy. I believe that he wants to do what is best for the country. But if you are one of our clients and you go to the Philippines and say, we'd like to find out what your energy program is and what the predictability of energy prices will be for the next 5-10 years, what will be the nature of that energy, the sources. If you did that 3-5 years ago, it would be extremely difficult to do that. So the unpredictability of our system has hurt us, and we must ask the question, bakit? What is responsible, right? Because we agree what needs to be done, what the target is. We know what point A is, what point B is. What we are not talking about is why we're not getting from point A to point B. We put pressure on the politicians, the decision makers, to make those decisions. Unless we do that, we are just going to coast along at 5-6% growth, to be honest, to be fair. Okay, I'm sorry to be, this is why probably people don't like political analysts to be involved in these conversations. But it's the difficult question I think we must ask now. And finally, my last point is, if you take a look at the JETRO surveys they do in the Philippines, you will see that the big complaints of the Japanese manufacturers are, one, LGU issues. The surveys are there on what makes it difficult to invest in the Philippines. Why are we not tackling the issues identified by these surveys? We are last for the Japanese in terms of local suppliers supplying to manufacturing firms. Last in all of Asia, not just in ASEAN. Okay, the Japanese complain about, from their surveys, uh, administrative problems, rules, taxation rules, right? The difficulty of complying with taxation rules. Why are we not solving those problems? So we have to ask, I think we have to ask the question, why are we not doing that? Because if we can do that, then we can go forward with a narrative to foreign countries and say, we have these issues, but we have worked on them, we have solved them. That is what the Vietnamese do. They go abroad and they say, we solve this. If you come here and we promise you something, we will work you through the whole system. And I think that's my contribution here as a political analyst. Again, these are my views as a Filipino who's lived abroad, who services clients abroad. We have no Philippine clients. Our clients are all people who invest in the Philippines. And when we practically look at the Philippines, we are number 4, 5, or 6 on the list of countries that they say should be invest there. And as you'd expect, for manufacturing, it's Vietnam. Low-end manufacturing, it's Cambodia. Then you have Thailand and Malaysia and Singapore for middle-level white goods, electronics. We can't compete. We're with Indonesia, unfortunately. That's why we still have the same export profile as we did 15, 20 years ago. So we have to ask those difficult questions. And I'd like some of the people maybe share it someday. Why don't we have the ports that we need for these exporters?
Yeah, well, those are good points. In fact, I guess what you're saying is that the urgency of the tariffs aside, these fundamental issues have always been there, right? That's been the what's been holding back Philippine manufacturing. We've been looking back at the past few manufacturing summits, and I mean, you said, Kita, these are similar topics, right? Dan's always talked about the energy problem. So these are great points, right? In a way, sure, maybe there is more urgency now, the tariffs. In a way, it gives a window of opportunity, but sometimes you're right. You're hearing that even then, if the opportunity is there, we're not capable of taking advantage. So
yeah. So last point then. Yeah. So the last point is this nga, kaya nga, as a political analyst, we've looked at it. We have some of the advantages. We have some of the things. We need to move up the productivity scale. Kasi as some people say, we have higher labor costs. You can offset higher labor costs with better productivity, not just in the factory itself, but across the economy. But to raise productivity, the investments have to be made. The investments will not be made if the things that have held back these investments persist. So we have to ask the question, what have persisted? And then put this forward to the people. Because it is they who will put pressure on the decision makers to make the right decisions. Otherwise, we can blame 10 different things, but we know there are certain things. So again, maybe just as an example, the port system. Why do you have inadequate ports? So I think that's important thing. And finally, as the last point on that, the challenge really for us is to also build a narrative abroad. But you can't build a narrative abroad without having the ability to back it up.
Yes, maybe I think to ask the question now to Dr. Fita or to our other panelists, right? I know there are many efforts around, or at least ideas to sort of tackle those individual things, support, energy. But I think Bob talked about the communication side, right? Like Vietnam, they go around saying we've solved X, Y, and Z. What's the latest effort? I know, Dr. Fita, you just left government, but what are you seeing in terms of trying to sort of tackle this sort of piece by piece or as a whole? And then maybe also, Dan, I know you have many opinions on this, but anything you've seen sort of bright spots that we've tried to sort of tackle these structural issues? Maybe Dr. Fita first.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Bob, for raising those points. Those are really critical, especially, I mean, this is not the first time we're raising all these binding constraints. All the, I think, all the participants in today's forum, they're very much aware. That's why when I presented the slide on this, I somewhat skipped and did not mention them anymore because we're really so familiar with the high power costs, the unreliable energy supply, which could really hinder our industry growth and investments, of course. This is one of the primary reasons why up to now we don't have wafer fabrication here in the country. And of course, the other problems on logistics, bottlenecks, high transport costs. I mean, so it's got to be an integrated effort. And DTI, of course, is handling the industrial policy side of it, the trade, investment, and our investment promotion agencies. But we need the support of other departments. So perhaps it's important that we have, we need to strengthen leadership. I mean, it's not easy to implement an industrial policy. In other countries, it's the president actually, or it's really the top most officials that are leading their industrial policy implementation. And of course, it's difficult when it's your colleague. For example, if you're the secretary and you will instruct DOE or DOSC or the others, you're of the same level. So maybe it should be coming from the president himself, just like what happened in Korea and even in Vietnam or China. I mean, it's really the topmost officials who are in charge in terms of implementing all these policies that are critical in order for us to address these binding constraints to investment growth. Of course, there are others, still bureaucratic burdens, skills gaps, workforce mismatches, our underdeveloped industrial ecosystems. We've heard about the problems earlier about with respect to the concerns of our MSMEs with clustering, lack of support services. And it's really difficult because right now what we're asking them to do is to expand, to scale up. But without the necessary support, it would really be very challenging. Access to finance, innovation support, and then lack of raw materials, weak parts, and components sector. When we compare the Philippines versus Malaysia, while of course I was saying a while ago, we're both strong when it comes to electronics, and we can position ourselves as an alternative location to those that would be coming and relocating from high risk jurisdictions. But the reality is the difference between the Philippines and Malaysia, for instance, is that we have a limited upstream, the raw materials, and midstream industries. These are still mostly imported. And again, this could undermine supply chain resilience and raise input costs. And hence, it's really important for us to focus and integrate our efforts. It has to be a whole of government whole of nation approach and strong collaboration between government, academe, industry. It's a whole of society effort. And it's really critical at this point because we're already seeing this window of opportunity. But if we don't act quickly, yeah, I'm afraid we're going to miss it again.
Thanks, Dr. Fita. I think I saw Marco's hand come up. If you wanna, anybody in this panel want to address this quickly? If not, we can move on to other questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just like to second Richard what Bob said. So that from the perspective of the coconut industry, that's also what we have been observing. Kulela talaga tayo sa foreign direct investment, even for the coconut industry, except for the low value added businesses like oil milling, where Wilmar and Cargill are involved there. But since we don't have too much FDIs on the value-added coconut products, it's really our local investors who have really put in a lot of confidence in developing that from the coconut sector. For example, si Mr. Ramon Ang is building a coconut biodiesel plant for Petron. Mr. Manny Pangalinan has invested a lot in Absolum, and we're also in Franklin Baker. Mr. Po on Century Pacific is very happy with their investment. Mr. Ding Lau on PNL is doing very nicely on their investment. But in terms of FDIs, yeah, that's what we are really missing. So,
Thanks, Marco. Dan?
Yes, thank you, Richard. I agree with Fita and Marco. No? And I know when the question of why is asked, I'm probably going to be preaching to the choir. But, to bring everybody's recall up to speed, and, if we address the elephant in the room, there's still that rampant corruption, bureaucracy, and everybody has their own agenda. I mean, it's easy to say, we work together, academia, government, private industry. But then again, the leadership really has to take stronger control. And I'll give you specific examples, right? I'm sorry if I quote examples from the industry, but some of this and most of this, if ever, affect other industries. Let's take this customs, the e-track system, the electronic tracking system. It was implemented. It adds a burden on already high logistics costs. You pay 700 pesos per container. And some companies are spending millions just for this. And why? And the question we pose to the authorities that why do you need to do this? In the 50 years of the industry, we haven't had any incidents of technical smuggling or diversion of exports, and yet you put this in place, right? Well, the reasons we've been given in 50 years, no incident whatsoever. The reasons we've been given is that, we can't play favorites for the industry, right? And the solution that was proposed, we'll lower the fee. Well, why do you need the fee to begin with when something that's not needed? We have GPS systems for our logistics providers. PEZA has strong controls. So I just don't get it, right? You talk about the COMELEC gun ban. Normally, without the elections, and elections coming up, by the way, the PNP regulates the transport of chemicals. It's a system that initially was cumbersome, but it's improved. It's been streamlined. And yet, during the elections, you duplicate the cost and the time frame, additional cost, and because you have a tripartite committee that of PNP, Armed Forces, and COMELEC, and they basically say, okay, we need to do this. But again, in 50 years, no incidents from the electronics industry. And yet, when ARTA tried to get into the picture, the answer was, we don't report to you, we report to the office of the president. So what is that, right? So this whole of country, whole of society approach is not going to work unless we really address the root causes and make these decisions. I mean, thank I thank the administration and the president for designating the electronics industry as priority. So finally, we can see some meat into the implementation and get some of this. I guess, in my mind, redundant and unnecessary rules. And so when you talk to the multinationals who are the investors, the questions are asked, why is the Philippines the only country that's doing this? And yet here we are trying to market and get investments. Now, one of the things that hopefully we've been distracted by the trade, the tariff discussions, but the create more create more roadshow is something that really needs to be promoted because it corrected the mistakes. And I know Carl Chu is here, but it's supposed to correct the mistakes of the create law in terms of incentives rationalization. The tax reduction was great, but the incentives rationalization caused capital flight, right? Point in fact, we told the Secretary of Finance then that if the create law was going to be implemented, the investment of this company will not come to the Philippines. True enough, months ago, $1.6 billion was invested in Vietnam, something that should have gone to the Philippines. 10,000 workers. So these are the kind of things that probably, it's water under the bridge that hopefully we can rectify. But unfortunately for the electronics industry, we can't bring back that factory. What we can do, though, is promote our changes in improvements and hopefully attract the new products, new technologies, because that's the life of the industry. If we keep on working, legacy products will shut down. And lastly, on the wafer fab, ironically, I've had a lot of pundits say that we don't need that, right? But I guess this is more of lack of understanding of the industry. You need to move up the value chain. You need to improve the technology. And I know it costs a lot of money, but then again, let's take baby steps, do a wafer lab first. I'm glad that DOST understands. And I'm glad that OSAPEA is listening, DTI is listening. But we've been getting a lot of resistance to do this because if we don't do this now, and I know it's going to take 5 years, but if we don't do this now, we're still going to be stuck with back-end assembly. And
let's move on to the next question because we're running out of time for
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm gonna take some questions from the chat because we were supposed to allot 20 minutes or 30 minutes to the Q&A here. I'll pick some questions because some questions already been answered by Dr. Fita here. I'll take one question because I think it impacts many sectors that are represented here. It's from Senate Perlada. Is it worthwhile to consider principles of cumulative value content and derogation for ASEAN collab to export to the USA? Examples, fabric from Thai, Vietnam, and then CMT and packing PH. Another is furniture, wood from other sources, or a tighter public-private collaboration for urgent strategic actions. Any thoughts there on sort of that? I think it's alluded to like the fabric would impact garments or the furniture sector. I think there's a related question also in the chat. Who wants to take that?
Oh, I can take the garments part. Actually, we've been looking at it. As I mentioned earlier, one of the possible retaliation again of the United States is to restrict the China movement of materials, right? So there's this big possibility that we're looking at that as long as you use US cotton, it's woven and knitted in probably Indonesia, the ASEAN countries that are a little far from the border of China, there is that possibility that cumulative accumulation can be imposed and can allow us to move around for the rules of origin. But this is already existing in the EU GSP law, no, the rules of origin. EU is more flexible. They allow accumulation. I think there are 3 or 4 separate areas that you can accumulate from this specific part of the world, and it can be allowed. The United States does not have that in the GSP rules set up now, but it is possible, and we're looking at that. Senen, when we were asked by Secretary Go, where do you think it would come from? Possibly Indonesia and Thailand, because we know that Cambodia and Vietnam, even if Vietnam has a very robust textile industry, it may be within the other ASEAN members. It's possible. Thank you.
Thanks. Other sectors would like to chime in, maybe from the furniture side. Do you have
Yeah.
experience?
Can I respond, Richard?
Sure, Sir Senen, you first, and
Okay,
then we can ask
just
somebody
very quick
else.
response. Thank you, Maritess. No, but beyond just the sectoral thing for garments, for example, where steps have already been taken, my concern is with the U.S. there will be some kind of quid pro quo. So if we're going to be asking for garments, what are they going to ask from us? Cars, or what sectors can the economy bear? So that we will be able to have a workable sectoral negotiation, because definitely sectoral FTA, correct me if I'm wrong, USEC-FITA, that's not possible, right? So there's got to be, the bilaterals could be very specifically defined, but there has to be something for something. And knowing how the Trump administration works, they're not just going to give you, okay, let's do garments, but, there's a but let us have whatever it is. So I think that's what we have to prepare for as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Senen.
Yeah,
Marco, Arjun, yeah.
if I may just add to that, um, I agree. We can offer possibly motor vehicles because right now the tariff on motor vehicles is something like 30%, which is quite high relative to our other sectors. Although, of course, we've already zeroed that for vehicles coming from ASEAN. And then we also gave that to Korea. Some product lines under vehicles were also given to Japan. And so I think, yeah, I think in exchange for all those things that will be asking from the US, increase the exemption list, reduce the 17%, meaning to get all these concessions, there's got to be an offer list. And I really think, looking at our tariff structure, we can provide that to the US. There are some other important products as well, but I think they're already low. I mean, the tariff rates are not that significant. And then, of course, plus our partnership, strengthening our partnership with the US with respect to the semiconductor industry. And we still have those ongoing partnerships, discussions, particularly on the upskilling of our electronics and semiconductor workforce. And plus, of course, there are some other geopolitical reasons on the table. So I think, yeah, but then I guess we just have to come up really with a comprehensive list, with a comprehensive offer list, what we will be asking in exchange. But I think our colleagues in DTI, they have that already.
Richard,
Yes,
can we take one more question and then we have to wrap up?
Yeah, Richard, I just would like to answer Senen's question, comment no, earlier. Is that all right? Richard?
Nawala yata. Go ahead, agent. Go ahead.
Yeah. Regarding din sa sourcing from or complementing yung ating manufacturing from other ASEAN region, we've been doing that in the past few years. In fact, we've been sourcing from Indonesia for some wood. But apparently 5 years ago, ang nangyari is nag-shift instead yung manufacturers from manufacturing here in the Philippines to manufacturing in Indonesia kasi yun nga yung high infrastructure cost natin, high labor cost, lahat, no? Production cost natin medyo mataas, no? So this tariff era, no, would create a lot of uncertainties in the market, which will actually hinder potential investors to come in. Kasi kanina nga nabanggit nga ni Bob, no, na bakit hindi ginagawa yung mga dapat gawin. So I think na observation namin sa industry na wala na yung mga investors namin sa industry, na wala yung mga big material suppliers, na wala yung mga nasa supply chain, no? Kasi bakit nga naman sila dito or sa Philippines mag-i-invest if nakita nila na mas malaki ang Vietnam, mas malaki yung Indonesia. So doon na lang sila mag-exert ng effort nila. No? So ganun yung nangyari. It all boils down to creating a comprehensive strategy for both the private and government. Sabi nga ni Dr. Fita kanina, dapat integrated, no? With government enabling a sound business environment for the SMEs, we should start with good governance. So battle cry naman natin to, alam natin lahat. But for the side of the industry, is to create a unified strategy to address yung aming productivity. But chicken and egg yan eh. Hindi rin namin alam kung paano, no? But paano magsisimula. But we want to expand our production, pero yung buyer side naman namamahalan sa amin. So yun lang, Bob.
Right. Richard, welcome back. We have to wrap up.
I know.
Kaya, Richard, you wanna give us a closing for the panel?
Okay, you want me to do the closing, but I guess
For the panel lang. And
yeah,
then
maybe for 4 minutes now. I think we have about 4 minutes left.
Mm.
Maybe just ask the panel quickly, try to give you 30 seconds. You know, we heard about the structural issues, right? And I hear you there. Many years we discussed sort of the fundamental issues here. But I think to Bob's point, no? Given this sort of equilibrium state that we're still waiting for to happen, it won't happen quick, 6 months, a year. But within this sort of uncertain shifting stage, what's the call to action? Like, what can we do from your perspective, from your industry? You already maybe touched it already, right? But what are the things that sort of you need to do or want to do, sort of in this uncertain, this wait and see stage, with tariffs? And please keep your answers very short, like maybe a 2-sentence answer. Thank you. Maybe I'll start with Marco.
Yeah, for us, the way we look at reciprocal tariffs is it's just a temporary situation. It does not distract us from the roadmap of the coconut industry. And these are mostly three things: value addition. We should not be stuck on exporting low value coconut oil. Second, expansion of export markets. We should not be all our eggs should not be in the US market. And third is in more investments or also value-added coconut products, foreign direct investments, as well as local investments. So those three, Richard. Thank you.
Thanks, Marco. How about Arjun?
Yeah, for us, to avoid being a passive bystander, and instead become a strategic winner in this global trade reshuffling, Philippine government must urgently align trade and industrial policy to support the industry by deploying robust trade defense tools against import flooding, facilitate access to sustainable and certified raw materials, especially US wood, invest in technology and skills upgrading for the SMEs, lower input cost, and actively promote Philippine furniture as a premium, culturally unique, and tariff resilient export through coordinated ASEAN and global engagement.
Thank you. Maritess.
One-liner, which was already mentioned by Bob, Yusek Fita, all of you guys: predictability and stability on key fiscal policies, especially on key fiscal policies. You know, the create law, now it's in place, stability on this, and national policies specifically on power, wage, predictability. That's all we need. And a robust trade negotiating team from the government, maybe something similar to the USTR. This was looked into before because at the end of the day, that's, I think, what we are up against in the global scenario. Thank you.
Thanks, Maritess. Dan, maybe from your sector, what's the game plan for the next 6 months or sort of when you're waiting for these things to settle? Dan, did
Can you
lose?
hear me?
Yep, now we hear you.
Well, from an industry perspective, just working with government, we're going to have an industry roadmap that's going to be published soon by DTI. So we need to work on that in terms of upgrading the technology, the capability. One thing we didn't talk about was the skills improvement, especially for test and deped, and more importantly in CHED. And for the government, really strong leadership in terms of navigating the geopolitical situation. FTAs, we did FTA with the USA, and addressing the operating cost, infrastructures and cost, and promoting trade to create more. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Maybe Bob, back to you since you put this premise about this equilibrium state. What do you advise companies or the Philippines, right, to sort of in the next 6 months, right? Is it more of a communications angle, given that obviously we have structural issues, or what do you advise in this sort of this pause period?
Focus on what you can control. So that's the first thing. The second thing is ask the really difficult questions, not as rhetorical questions. Why are we not doing what we need to do? And what are these things? And what do we need to do next so that they can be done within a time period that matters to our manufacturers, to our industries? Yung wala na, no more dribble, right? No more dribble. Answer the difficult questions and demand from the leadership, from our politicians, answers to these difficult questions. Because you have all these people, well-intentioned, capable people in government, Fita, Popo Lotilia, all of them who have been there, but the difficult questions have not been answered on why we have regressed and lack the ability to compete. Unless we ask those questions, unless we insist on answers, we're just going to meander.
Thanks, Bob. So answering the difficult questions. I know there's a question in the chat about, what does this all mean to people on the street, right? And it's sort of the same difficult question, right? Maybe for the manufacturers, it's their competitiveness or survival, but also what's the impact to like ordinary Filipinos. So I guess you're right. Right? Ultimately, it's these outcomes and so what questions that we'll need to answer. Okay. Discussion. So thanks again to our panelists and to our speaker, Dr. Fita. Back to you.
Thank you.
Bobby.
Thank you, Richard. Excellent panel and excellent moderator, Richard. I couldn't have done it the way you did it. So I really appreciate it. It was an excellent discussion, no? And I just want to share a few things that came out, my takeaways. It is important that this is taken to the highest level, no? And I see Secretary Go taking this role, no? He's able to coordinate across the different agencies, and of course he has the ear of the president, no? I think legislature is very important. Often the manufacturing sector don't have a strong and coordinated voice in legislature. I mean, I've been part of, many legislative committees, and usually it's either non-manufacturing or a sectoral concern. I think we need to do better in that, no? And maybe our group is the right group to do that. I also say that while we think about maganda sinabi ni Bob Herrera-Lim, sabi niya, not the rhetorical questions. You know how all of us, myself guilty as well, na anong problema? Oh, EODB, ease of doing business, energy. Totoo naman. Pero it doesn't usually lead to solutions eh. Kaya it's the hard questions that are important, no? Which is related to let's realize now while we're thinking about the problems, let's look at the let's look at the solutions. I mean, recently, Create More was instituted. I mean, some are very quick to realize that, oh, this actually reduces it gives me 100% additional reduction in energy cost. So, one guy is asking me about energy, the other one already knows what the solution is. Tatak Pinoy. We've done it. There is going to be a lot of people are excited, but how can domestic naman to? How can domestic manufacturers take advantage of that? No, so I have a sense that this is the kind of forum that is meant for it, no? So, ang takeaways so yung action points natin dito is that we're gonna summarize our recommendations, make a letter to Secretary Go and send it to him. Just for your info, in our February, and a lot of you know this, in our February session on Trump Tariff 2.0, we did exactly the same. We summarized our discussion, we sent it to Secretary Go, and I would think that helped him, Secretary Roque, Alan Gepti, and everybody concerned in this one. So, ang advantage natin is our group is kind of fast. We can organize something in a week, and then you are all very candid and you're well represented. So I think we need to keep on doing this, pero not stop in the group, but make it actionable for government. So at that, 5 minutes to go. Last
Bobby.
plug. Yes, Tina. Yes, sorry.
Yeah, Bobby, let me just to add to what you've mentioned. Of course, there's there's Secretary Go, and I would like to propose the creation of an integrated industrial transformation and investment authority. It's going to be a centralized, empowered body that would align our industrial policy, trade strategy, skills development, and investment promotion. That's number one. And number two, if Secretary Go can head it, I think that would be best. And number two would be to support not only foreign investors, but including and most especially, we need to build our own local manufacturing companies, whether they would serve the domestic market or they go directly to exports, which I think is not really feasible. So they really need to start serving the domestic market, and they need to receive the same level of support, the same level of incentives, similar to what exporters are getting. Because if we're going to look at the history, the industrial development of Korea and Taiwan, they provided support, they provided subsidies and other incentives, fiscal, non-fiscal, in order for them to grow their own companies. TSMC was supported by the government through E3. It was a startup coming from E3. And then, of course, we have LG, we have Samsung from Korea.
Okay, good. Excellent ending, Fita. Maraming salamat sa inyo. We had 95 people joining today. Nakakatuwa. I'm looking forward to our future event. So at that, thank you very much. Have a happy weekend and go out and vote.